Welcome to Defeat Dementia Naturally. I'm Dr. David DeRose, your host for this presentation. We're going to be looking at things that you can do to decrease the risk of dementia affecting you and those that you love. As we begin, who really should be concerned about this topic? You know, it struck me as a physician over the years that it seems that many times people who most need a message that either I have to present or someone else is presenting just don't seem to be tuned into it at all. So this is an important question. Just who should be concerned? Well, my appreciation for the answer to that question took on new significance when I was reading from the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the edition, one edition that came out in May of 2013. That weekly publication actually comes from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, looking at a variety of illnesses and conditions that are affecting the American populace. In this particular study, some 60,000 Americans, a representative sample of people living throughout the United States, came under sharp focus as the researchers looked at just how prevalent early signs of dementia were. What they were looking at is individuals who had episodes of confusion, increased confusion or memory loss in the preceding 12 months. What did the researchers find when they looked at individuals 60 years of age and older? Believe it or not, they found that over 12% of those responding, and again, a representative sample, that means that statistically, it's likely that we're looking at a genuine cross-section of the American population. 12%, so roughly 1 in 8 people were saying, I've got evidence of cognitive decline. I've been more confused. I've had memory problems of an increased severity over the last 12 months. Now, when I looked at that, I said, okay, over 60 years of age, but there's lots of people who are living in their 80s, 90s. There's people over 100. Maybe the reason that percentage was so high was because of that older group. We would say it was skewed because of those older individuals with higher rates of dementia and thus symptoms indicating dementia. But that wasn't the case. Because when you looked at the age group, even 60 to 64 years of age, about 12% of them had early indicators of cognitive challenge. Who needs to be concerned about dementia? Anybody who's planning to age and to age with grace. Think about it, right? We're going to all have that 60th birthday if it hasn't happened already, and unless we succumb to something else. So the point is simply this: we need to be concerned about caring for our cognition. The evidence suggests that there are natural things we can do to defeat dementia. Those things, you might not be surprised, in the context of our series, can be aptly summarized with the phrase LifeStart. That's right, LifeStart. Let's take some examples. If you're not familiar, by the way, with the LifeStart mnemonic, it actually summarizes 9 essential lifestyle practices that can make a difference as far as decreasing your risk of a host of conditions and improving the quality of your life. If you're not familiar with the mnemonic, log in to our website at lifestartseminars.com and pick up our free ebook that will actually give you a little bit more insight into this paradigm. Well, LifeStart, actually those 9 elements, one of them, the S in LifeStart, so the first letter of the word start, actually stands for sunlight. Let's talk about that first as we're speaking about defeating dementia. Some very interesting research just recently coming out of the neurology literature, the journal Neurology 2014. What they found is they looked at the U.S. population, again, trying to get an idea of a spectrum of individuals living in this great country. They found that by measuring vitamin D levels, they could predict risk of dementia. There was what we call a dose-response relationship. In other words, what these researchers found is individuals that had very low levels of vitamin D had a significantly higher risk of dementia, over doubling their risk of dementia as compared to those with normal levels of vitamin D. As you looked at more modest decreases in vitamin D, that increased risk was somewhere around 50%. The bottom line is we need to ensure that we have optimal vitamin D levels. If you are vitamin D deficient, you are not on a trajectory to defeat dementia. You're actually increasing your risk of dementia. That's what the data indicates. So our first takeaway point in this presentation, we need to prioritize sunshine exposure. That's the way we make vitamin D. And if there's some reason why you can't do that, or you live in the part of the country or the world where you don't get much sunshine, then you need to take a vitamin D supplement. By the way, just an aside, if you haven't heard other presentations where I speak about vitamin D and parts of the world where you don't make much of it, especially in the winter months, then pay some attention to this topic. Just an example. Boston, Massachusetts has been studied. 4 months of the year, you cannot make adequate amounts of vitamin D because the sun does not come up high enough above the horizon. Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, 5 months of the year. Bergen, Norway, 6 months of the year. The same would be true in the southern hemisphere in the winter months there. So the point is, any question about vitamin D status, if you're not getting out in the sun, hey, you got any question? Just have your vitamin D level checked. What you ask for is something called 25-hydroxy vitamin D. Ask your doctor for that test. By the way, I know we go through some of this material quickly. We have a study guide that is free as well, gives you more information about the things we're talking about. Again, that's available for you free on LifeStartSeminars.com. Well, let's move on from vitamin D and the S, the sunlight, in the mnemonic LifeStart, and let's look at another element. In the word start, the T stands for temperance, total avoidance of things that are harmful, and moderation in things that are good, and the A stands for fresh air. There is a habit in America embraced by literally millions of people that is at the interface of both temperance and fresh air. It has to do with cigarette smoking. Does cigarette smoking have any role in cognition? Now, I know some of you, if you've ever smoked, you say, hey, smoking helps me. I get kind of a mental clarity when I have a cigarette. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about that. Individuals who are smoking on a regular basis, nicotine has what we call a very short half-life. What that means is from the time of your last cigarette until the time you start going through moderate withdrawal or early withdrawal symptoms is perhaps as little as 1 to 2 hours. What that means is you can start having a deterioration in your concentration. You can start feeling a little bit more anxious just because you're addicted to nicotine and you haven't had any nicotine in a relatively short time. When you smoke, may help you calm down, may help you seem to think clearer, but it's not because smoking is a boon to cognitive health. The research actually indicates just the opposite. The message from the research is smoking is a risk factor for dementia. In 2007, Australian researchers did what we call a meta-analysis. They collected 19 prospective studies. That means studies that have looked at people over time. Involved in these studies were tens of thousands of people. In one of those studies, they followed individuals for up to 30 years. So, what did they find when they looked at these individuals? First of all, when they pooled all these studies, at the time of initial assessment, if you compared someone who had ever smoked with someone who never smoked, let's make it more dramatic. You compare those who are currently smoking and you compare them with those who never smoked, what kind of difference do you think they found? They found a 79% increased risk of having Alzheimer's disease, and a 78% increased risk of having what we call vascular dementia. So Alzheimer's is a form of dementia that can sometimes track in families. Vascular dementia is actually a dementia that is caused by small strokes or large strokes over time. Refers to the blood vessel supply to the brain. Bottom line, nearly a doubling of risk of showing up. When you're talking with the investigator, you have nearly twice the likelihood of having dementia if you are a current smoker. But that's not all. Remember, these studies, some of them followed people for 2 years, 5 years, some up to 30 years. What did they find is they followed smokers over time. So you get the picture? At any point in time, you interview a smoker, they're going to be more likely to have dementia. But now you take that person with no dementia and you follow them over time, what happens? There's an increased decline in cognitive abilities in the smokers over time. There is a 70% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Do you see we're actually looking at two different things? And some researchers would say the study over time is more powerful because it suggests that it really is a factor related to smoking. If you just look at one point in time, someone could say, well, are more people with dementia, do they smoke? Is that what causes them to smoke or perpetuates their smoking? But if you look over time, what you see is greater development of Alzheimer's disease. I think you see the bottom line. The bottom line is if you are looking for more reasons to stop smoking, I mean, here it is. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Smoking is not just related to things that cut your life short, like cancer and heart disease. It also increases your risk of dementia. If you want to defeat dementia, the message is clear. Not only do you want to get adequate sunshine, not only do you want to ensure that you have good vitamin D levels, but you want to make sure that you get rid of that habit of cigarette smoking. We want to move now to the last element in the LifeStart paradigm, that element of trust. We often talk about trust in divine power, trust in a higher power, something beyond you. Very, very interesting. Many people say, well, you know, you kind of tack that one on. I'm not going to get too involved with that trust element. This is fascinating data, relatively recent data coming out looking at distrust. These researchers looked at something called cynical distrust. So it's the idea that no one cares about me. No one cares what happens to me. It's not safe to trust anyone. You get the picture? When they look at individuals that have that approach to living, they have a higher risk for dementia. Now you say, well, of course, they're more likely to have dementia. These people are probably depressed, they have mental illness. No, even when they try to explain it by depressive symptoms, that does not explain it. There is something about trusting other people that actually helps the brain. An interesting insight into this comes from research on a compound called oxytocin. That's right, oxytocin. Quite fascinating. Oxytocin has been known about for years because it's involved in maternal-infant relationships. But we now know that oxytocin is a trust hormone. That's right. Oxytocin is involved in trusting relationships. And so if you trust other people more, it actually helps your brain make more oxytocin. Now, it's actually made by the pituitary gland with signaling from the brain, but it's this whole neuroendocrine pathway that's involved in producing oxytocin. And what I mean by neuroendocrine, if that's a big word, it's simply the fact that the brain and the hormonal mechanisms of the body are connected, and trust is something powerful that impacts the brain and impacts us hormonally. So don't look at the LifeStart paradigm and say, well, the trust in divine power, that trust element really doesn't make much difference. When it comes to defeating dementia, the evidence suggests it is an important component as far as maintaining optimal cognition. Well, let's move on just a little bit further and look at some other natural strategies that can help us in this quest to optimize brain performance and to avoid dementia. Some of you may be familiar with one of my favorite brain health compounds. It's something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I know that's a mouthful, but let's break it down just a little bit. Brain-derived means this compound is actually made by your brain. Neurotrophic, neuro refers to neurons or brain cells. Trophic refers to growth. So this is a brain-derived, brain-made, brain-created, brain-produced compound that actually helps your brain cells thrive. Why BDNF is so exciting is it actually holds promise for helping us prevent dementia. Now, I speak about this in detail in my mini-series, The Brain Health Revolution, but I want to give you some of the high points. In that larger presentation, I speak about some of the far-reaching benefits of BDNF, how it can help you with depression, how it can help you with addictive states. But in this presentation, we're focused on dementia. And I want to look with you at two of the leading causes of dementia affecting millions of people in the United States alone. We're speaking about Alzheimer's disease, of course, and also that neurodegenerative disorder known as Parkinson's disease, because Parkinson's can also cause dementia. BDNF has been shown to help you decrease your risk of both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Well, the question then becomes, BDNF, how do I increase it? What can I do? There are 4 key strategies that can help you improve levels of BDNF, and thus, in addition to sunshine, in addition to trusting relationships, in addition to not smoking, just another window on things that can improve your likelihood of never having to deal with dementia. Let's go through these 4. The first one is dietary restriction. So if you're thinking in terms of our mnemonic, LifeStart, L for liquids, I for interpersonal relationships, F is for foods. So dietary restriction takes in foods, but it also takes in the T in LifeStart. T stands for temperance. So dietary restriction is the concept of eating what is good for you in moderation. Let's talk a bit about it. What's so interesting to me about dietary restriction is if you look at animal studies of longevity, you'll find that animals consistently live longer with modest caloric restriction. The evidence suggests that one of those health-giving attributes of dietary restriction is this, that it increases compounds of this BDNF. So if you're focused on defeating dementia, then you are going to want to do what? You're going to want to make sure that you do not overeat and that maybe you even practice fasting occasionally. Maybe skipping the evening meal. By the way, you don't want to skip breakfast. That's an important meal for optimal brain performance throughout the day. But skipping the evening meal can aid you in weight reduction and can also help increase BDNF levels. The reason I say that is in the research, cutting back on calories as little as 30% significantly boosts levels of this dementia-fighting compound. Well, if caloric restriction can help with boosting BDNF levels and also helping to avoid Alzheimer's, do we know why there are these connections? Is it only BDNF? Is that the only reason why I need to be careful as far as dementia? Because maybe I could do 3 of these other 4 things that Dr. DeRose is going to give us in this presentation, and I can eat as much as I want. Well, let me tell you, some very interesting research being done in the halls of those working with dementia prevention. One of the leading research groups is based there at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, now referred to as the Icahn School of Medicine. And what they've been studying is dementia. What factors predispose us to dementia? And they found in their research that dietary factors loom large when it comes to risk of dementia. One of the things that they highlight is having a special role in promoting the Alzheimer's disease changes in the brain is the consumption of saturated fat. Saturated fat is typically found in animal products. So what we're seeing here when it comes to that F in LifeStart is a very important aspect. We want to avoid overeating. We want to think about periodic fasting. And by the way, if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, questions about the safety of fasting, you want to check with your physician before embarking on such a practice. But you definitely can cut back on saturated fat. The way you do that is by eating less in the way of animal products and eating more in the way of plant products that tend to be low in saturated fat. Well, let's hasten on and look at the 3 other areas that can help us in dealing with dementia by boosting levels of BDNF. So, one way we do it, we cut back on our caloric intake. What is the second area? The second area brings up another LifeStart element. It's the E in life, E standing for exercise. That's right. Regular physical exercise actually boosts levels of this brain protective compound. It has been shown in research in animal models. It's been shown in human studies that exercise can increase BDNF levels in the range of 30% after a single exercise session. So the message here is if you're concerned about brain health, you need to be concerned about physical activity. You need to be making a regular priority of getting physical exercise. How much exercise do you need? Well, it's true that the more moderate exercise you get, it seems the better you do in the department of BDNF. But having said that, even a little amount of exercise is better than none. Now let me tell you something else very interesting in this relationship between dementia, cognitive health, and exercise. They've noticed in animal models that if you get under more stress, stress depresses BDNF levels. Now, exercise helps to offset stress, so that's part of why this connection is coming in here. But listen very carefully. If the stress is persistent, not only does BDNF levels drop, but scientists have actually been able to measure atrophy or a wasting away of a critical brain region known as the hippocampus. The hippocampus is involved in memory. Think about it. What is one of the hallmarks of dementia? It's memory problems. So part of the strategy that we want to focus on is stress management, and one of the ways you manage your stress is by physical activity, whether it's running or walking, whether it's biking or swimming. Being more physically active can make a difference, not only in raising BDNF levels, but in diffusing stress, which is one of the keys that can help you defeat dementia. Well, we need to move on to the third element that can help you raise those levels of BDNF, that natural compound, brain-derived neurotrophic factor that can help you as far as fighting off 2 common sources of dementia, 2 common causes, namely Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. Well, that third element that we want to talk about is environmental enrichment or environmental stimulation. Now, this is easy to conceptualize if you're working with rats, because if rats are in their usual housing environment, you know, you maybe even had rodents as pets. I mean, I had them growing up, and you know, they've got that water bottle that hangs on their cage, and they've got the little food dish, and they've got the wheel because, you know, the rat or the mouse or the hamster has got to be active, but it's really a pretty boring environment when you think about it. An environmentally enriched setting would be when you move that rat or that hamster into a more natural setting. You let it go in the yard. I mean, good luck, you know, getting it back again. Or you put it in a box that's got all kinds of natural obstacles, and it can dig in there, not just, you know, dig in the shavings, you know, the cedar shavings that you got in the bottom of the cage. You get my point. It's now engaging with the environment at a much higher level. This environmental enrichment, whether we look at animal models or whether we look at human models of dementia, is very, very powerful. You say, well, what does that mean, Dr. DeRose? You want to stick me, you know, move out of my house, live out in nature? Well, you know, actually a camping trip may accomplish that. By the way, any change in setting is environmentally enriching. You get out of your routine. I know sometimes it's frustrating. It may be difficult. Maybe you're going to help on a project in a third world country. Maybe you're building something there. Maybe you don't have the modern conveniences. Or maybe you're at a 5-star hotel in a different place in the world or country. Any of these situations is environmentally enriching because it's challenging your brain to deal with different situations. Along these lines, education helps you lower your risk of Alzheimer's disease. Might I say it? That's why these LifeStart seminars are so powerful, because just engaging on this level, just learning this material, just tapping into the website, getting the free resources, whether it's a free ebook or the study guides that go along with this, tapping into some of the other educational programs we have, all of these things can challenge the mind, can be environmentally enriching in that way, and can thus decrease your risk of dementia. Well, let's talk about the last area of BDNF increasing practices, and it's this. It's avoiding alcohol. Alcohol exposure imbalances the various nerve growth factors in the brain. It can raise them in some areas, lower them in other areas, such as in the hippocampus, that critical area for memory. I recommend, if you want to function optimally at a brain level, you want to take alcohol out of the program. Alcohol is a depressant, even in small amounts. It blunts the frontal lobe, so you lose some of your discriminating faculties when you're even under a small amount of alcohol influence. And remember that connection with the hippocampus. You take alcohol in, the research indicates you will drop levels of BDNF in that important brain memory region. Hopefully, you've seen in this presentation how LifeStart is really telling us about 9 natural elements that can help you defeat dementia. We haven't looked at every one of them, but we saw how temperance, avoiding things like smoking and alcohol, eating in moderation can help with dementia. We saw how sunlight can boost levels of vitamin D and thus help you avoid things like Alzheimer's disease. We showed you how trust in divine power and trusting relationships with others can help you as far as brain health. And as we close, let me close on that note, because LifeStart is not just about educational materials, it's also about support. There are free coaching options where you can connect with other people by going to our website at lifestartseminars.com. So whether it's more educational material, whether it's connecting with other people, whether it's just making a point to exercise, to be temperate in your eating, to avoid harmful substances, you can defeat dementia. I'm Dr. David DeRose for LifeStart Seminars.